This story began in 2010. Up at college, I wanted to major in computer science. During the first 3 semesters, I picked up and excelled at C++ computer programming, even proposing harder assignments because I was bored with the standard assignments the teachers assigned to us. I wanted to challenge myself. Unfortunately, programming was the only thing I excelled at, and so when it came to everything else, web design, hacking, studying the theory behind computer science, I found out that the major wasn't for me a couple of years later by 2012. What this ended up doing is putting me into the field of countdown making, starting with the top 288 Legend of Zelda bosses. For those who have known me for a while, I've tried this project before a couple of times and failed pretty bad. The first time I had no Sony Vegas experience, so I recorded it straight off of the DOS screen and I only had 25 views max. Yeah, pretty embarrassing. Back when I had about 25 subscribers. The last time I succeeded. Well, sort of. It did start working, but 2 big problems came up. The first being that there was a bug in the code in one of the variables, and another one wasn't updated for Generation 6 standards, which is a no-no. The other problem is that I didn't understand my limitations at the time, and this goes for all YouTubers out there. It's important to know how to pace yourself in video editing and to set realistic goals. With my last effort, I pushed myself too hard on a schedule and burned myself out really bad. I'm only human after all, and it's absolutely essential to have a mindset like one. You simply can't do everything. It's not possible, and everyone has limits. It's just the way it is. It's important to relax and keep at a steady pace without overdoing it. So this will be my final time, and I've got to get it out before it gets outdated. So this is how it's going to work. There will be 12 videos going through the ranking of all 720 Pokemon, each of them in 15-second pauses. I will be providing no commentary because it'll be a backbuster, and I think this is more like an encyclopedia deal. Something for you to interpret from the numbers being presented on what it means for you. I can't do any effects because the second part of my last effort crashed so bad that I lost all of my data from Sony Vegas. So no powerful flashy effects. My Sony Vegas can't handle it. Because of this, I know it won't get popular, but I think it'll be a decent thing for some people to see, so I'd like to do it for them. Besides, it's a really cool project and I don't want to leave it in the dust on my shelf. It's a nice closure for me from the effort I put into it with the coding and organizing, and I did disappoint some Pokemon fans last time in calling it off suddenly, so it'll work out for everyone. If you don't want to watch it because if it's too slow, too monotonous, too uninteresting due to lack of effects or commentary, or simply not for you, then I will not take the slightest bit of offense in you not wanting to watch it. Next is the criteria on how I'll be judging these Pokemon with my algorithm. They will be judged between 0 to 100 points on each category, and with 10 categories in total for each Pokemon, it could go anywhere between 0 to 1000 points. So this is how the 0 to 100 range is going to work with each category. If it is 50 points, then it means that the Pokemon is in the absolute middle of the category or completely average throughout the entire roster of the Pokemon. If it has 0 points, then it means that it is the absolute worst in the whole collection when ranked up. The opposite holds true as well. If it's 100 points, that means that no Pokemon will ever trump over that Pokemon and what it can do in the area. No contest. So this means that if the Pokemon is above 50 points, this means the Pokemon is above average in that certain field, with under 50 meaning, obviously, being below average on the usual contender. Next, we have the 10 categories that each Pokemon will be compared on, at which all of the categories' points will be added up with for their total for the ranking. For the first 3 categories, it'll focus on the Pokemon's natural stats. The first category is their base stats, meaning their stats that they start out with at their low levels. The second category will focus on their worst possible stats that they can get at level 100, and the third one, the final category for the stats, will focus on their best outcome that could be made possible for the Pokemon. The next 2 categories focus on their type weaknesses and strengths. Now you could be thinking, because this Pokemon has this move and this move, that the weaknesses and strengths could be wrong when you see the number, but I'm not focused on abilities. Because of natural moves and TMs, any Pokemon could be unpredictable in a type battle, but instead I'm focusing on the Pokemon's inherent 1 or 2 types. So the weakness category will account for how many types of elemental moves will be super effective against the Pokemon, and the second category, their resistances, will bring in what they're resistant against with their 1 or 2 types. For example, when you see this message, it's not very effective or doesn't harm the Pokemon at all. For example, ground types can't touch flying Pokemon, that sort of thing. The next 3 categories will focus on the Pokemon's movesets, with the first category focusing on the number of natural moves the Pokemon can learn. As it will go for the next 2 categories as well, is that the number of natural moves is important to help vary out the field of strategy with how to customize your Pokemon. and it helps in the first category that a Pokemon can learn their own moves to hold their ground on natural development. The second category will focus on how many HMs the Pokemon can hold. At first this doesn't seem like a big deal, but I think it does. For one, everyone needs to have HMs with their Pokemon at one point or another, so HMs determine how much more likely it is to keep that Pokemon as a permanent part of your adventure. Remember that I'm not judging these just on battle conditions, but also through traveling through the overworld as well. Trust me, without any HM Pokemon, you are not going far in a Pokemon game, so they are important in being able to carry some lasting potential. The last category will focus on the amount of TMs the Pokemon is able to learn. Again, the more TMs a Pokemon can learn, well, everyone knows how much potential that has for turning battles into your favor. Probably the most important category here for that. The last two categories focus on how rare the Pokemon is and how hard it is to catch. I will determine how rare the Pokemon is by adding up the total amount of areas that they are found across all of their games divided by the number of Pokemon games that Pokemon is found in. This will determine the average by which that Pokemon is usually found. By the way, there will be moments when it will be 0, meaning you need some special circumstance to get that Pokemon. For example, only with trading and evolution found only from a Pokemon like a stone, or a Pokemon from an earlier stage of evolution, etc. I will count Pokemon that can be obtained at one point, like for example starter Pokemon as an area, or legendary Pokemon found in the overworld though, so heads up about that. The last category is by how hard it is to catch the Pokemon, and this is important because of a few reasons. Harder Pokemon to catch makes you a more diverse Pokemon trainer. It means it's a rarer Pokemon, and overall, it makes them stand out from the average crowd, and that's a thing to compare where legendaries and higher tier Pokemon get involved. Alright, we've covered all the bases. I think we're good to go. However, because I need to finish the last part to the 3D Zelda Dungeons, and it's going to be a long video, it'll take me a bit before I can turn my attention to this. So after that, this will be what I'm working on, and it's something to look forward to. I'll see you then.